Hey, so in our last video, we built a very basic HTTP client with Node using its standard HTTP library. For those that missed it, the code looks a little something like this. It's really simple. It just requires HTTP. It listens on port 8080, gives us a little message when it starts up, and then for every single request, it passes it to this handler object, which just returns hello world. So if we were to go ahead and run node on index.js, it'll give us our little message, and then we can go over to localhost 8080, and sure enough, we get hello world. So that's great. And then for those that were watching the last video, we noticed as we wanted to poke around at stuff, we kind of had this pretty arduous process, right? Where I would do something like, I wanted to see request URL. So I'd console.log request.url. And then since it's cached, I'd have to go over to here and Control C to kill that process and hit up and enter to restart it. And then go back over to the browser and refresh again, and then go back over to the terminal and see what gets printed out. So that's pretty tough, and you don't really want to be building applications like that, going through all that hassle. So today we're going to talk about the Node debugger. In my opinion, there are some better debugging tools for Node that are third-party libraries, mainly Visual Studio Code. The editor comes with a built-in debugger. And then there's a package called Node Inspector. I'm going to cover those in videos not in this series, but for today we're just going to talk about the built-in Node.js debugger. So we can check out the docs for it over on Node.js documents, pick a version, and then find debugger. And I'll let you go through and read this, but the basic gist of it is something like this. So we can go into our code, and instead of this console log statement, we can basically just set a breakpoint by typing the word debugger. It's worth pointing out, if you haven't seen my Chrome DevTools series, that this syntax actually works in client-side code too. The browsers are smart enough to know if you put this debugger line in, they should pause and open up your element inspector for you. So that's pretty handy. But today we're just going to be focusing on Node. So we've got this line in here, and I'll save it. And then the only other difference that we'll do, I'll Control C, is instead of node index.js, we'll do node debug index.js. And this just basically, you don't want it stopping if you leave like debugger statements in production apps. So you have to be in debug mode to get access to this stuff. Hit enter on that. And it's going to start up this server. It actually starts a little HTTP client over here. So if we wanted to see, it's just got some meta information. But this is the port that the debugger is running on. Tells me what version of Node and stuff like that. And then it's going to pause here at this first assignment. So this is the assignment of HTTP. If I wanted to see what it is, I'm kind of in this like REPL mode now, right? Where I can type HTTP and it'll print out all that stuff. And if I want to move on, I can just hit cunt for continue. So I'll hit cunt, and then here we go. We see server is listening at 8080. So now if I go back over here, I'm just going to kind of split my screen so it's easier to see. And I refresh this page, the debugger will stop where our debugger statement was put. So this is nice. We can do things if we wanted, like we can go further into a REPL, and from this REPL we can kind of poke around at all this stuff going on, like print out request or something like that. It's going to take a second. And I can Control C to go back into debug mode from the REPL. Another really great thing that you can do is you can add watchers. So you can say something like watch request. And now if I type watchers, I'll see that I guess request is a pretty big object. Okay, so it's watching this huge object, which is not really what I want. So very similarly, I can go back through, and instead of watch request, I can unwatch request. And now if I type watchers, I should see nothing. Great. So I can watch something a little smaller, like request.url. And then I can type watchers and see that request.url is the /. So this is a lot smoother, basically taking a breakpoint in your code and kind of going through at your own pace. You can do cool things like tab complete. So if I drop into the REPL, right, and I type something like start typing request and I hit tab, it'll fill in request for me. And if I hit dot and then hit tab again, I can get access to all the different parameters, all the different keys that are on this request object. Boom, all of them here. So this is really helpful now. So if I wanted to see like headers or something like that, I can type request headers and hit enter, and I can see all these things that come, here's my user agent and language and all that stuff. So especially as you're getting to know Node.js, I think this is a really invaluable tool. It's a much better workflow than console logging all over the place. You can just drop one debugger line in and kind of just take this moment, this like place in your code, and just start poking around with anything that you're interested in, which I think is pretty cool. There is also an API. I'll Control C to go back to the debugger. You can do things like set breakpoint, and then you can do like a file name and a line as well. I think that's more advanced usage. Maybe we'll cover that in another video. But for now, this is how I debug Node applications.